Check 1 2 1 2. Good morning, everyone. It's now 2 minutes past 10. Welcome, honorable members, staff of Parliament present here, delegation from National Treasury, delegation from Auditor General. Good morning. Honorable members and colleagues, today we are going to receive critical briefing from the Auditor General and the National Treasury on the performance of provincial treasuries and their entities. This session is pivotal in fulfilling our constitutional mandate of oversight and accountability over public funds, public finances. The AG and the National Treasury insights will shed light on audit outcome, financial governance, and compliance within provincial treasuries. The information we are going to get here will prepare us for when we meet provincial treasuries in our next meetings. Honorable members, today's focus will be on Eastern Cape and Northwest, right? And these are the two provinces we are getting briefing from next week, as we will be meeting them, the Eastern Cape and the Northwest. However, we encourage the Auditor General and the National Treasury, if terms allows, to capacitate the committee with information of other provinces. I think that one is also communicated to you. So that this will not be the last engagement we are having with the AG and the National Treasury. I think after they brief us about the two provinces, they will also keep on coming to also brief us about other provinces. But it does not mean that we will not be able to touch other provinces if terms allows. Yes. Secretary, can I check if there is any apology?
Yes.
Either from ourselves and the National Treasury, and maybe during their introduction they will also indicate.
Yes, thanks, Chair. On our side, Chairperson, we have only one apology from Mr. Ryder. He will be joining us late. Thanks, Chair.
That's the only apology. Any other apology? None. We're going to practice the whole day.
Oh, okay. Good morning, Chair and honorable members. I'd like to tender apology for our Deputy Minister who's assigned to Intergovernmental Relations, DM Sarupen, and the Director General. Thank you.
Okay. Apology of the Deputy Minister. Okay. No, thanks very much. And allow me to hand over to Auditor General, Ms. Maharaj. I'm told that is the leader of the delegation. You will be able to also introduce your people that you came up with, or maybe they will introduce themselves. It's upon you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honourable Chairperson. Greeting to yourself as well as the honourable members. Greetings to the delegation from National Treasury as well as my colleagues. My name is Vanuja Maharaj. I'm the head of portfolio at the Auditor General's office, responsible for the three provinces, namely Eastern Cape, Mpumalanga, as well as KwaZulu-Natal. Today with me are the leaders who are also going to help me to do the presentations. We have Bomkazi Bobo, who is the business unit leader from Mpumalanga. We have Tokasizi Sabisi, who's the business unit leader from the Northwest. And then we have the acting business unit leader, Tubile Nteta from the Eastern Cape. And with next to me is Sipokazi, who is from the Eastern Cape but has graciously offered to help us with moving the slides for us. Honorable Honorable Chairperson, you will see that we have sent through very detailed slides. The idea is that you always can turn to the slides to get all the information as and when required, including when you are doing your visits. When we're presenting, we will probably just highlight the key messages that comes through from these slides. In terms of our vision and mission, I like to think that most of my colleagues have done justice before me with regards to this. But just to remind all of us here today that we audit three areas, namely the audit of the financial statements, the audit of the predetermined objectives, as well as the compliance with legislation. So those are the three must-haves that you will see in any audit report. In there, you will also find the internal control deficiency. And essentially what that is, it really gives you what is causing all of these findings in the audit report. As you progress into reading the audit report towards the latter part of it, you will also see that if MIs, that is the material irregularities that have been issued, what is the progress, where they are at in terms of those the specific financial year. And then we also close off the audit report by speaking to any investigations that are perhaps happening by other institutions. Part of our mandate is really about looking at the service delivery, because certainly the service delivery has a link to the lived realities of the citizens. And that means that we take our multi-talented teams to visit projects, because essentially that's where the monies should be spent according to the mandates. And we are able to give some really a critical message in terms of what is happening out there as far as the service delivery. And thereafter, we also publish our general report, which has essential information where we analyze the information and give the key trends and messagings that come out of it. So today we are going to focus, as the chair has said, we will focus on Eastern Cape as well as the Northwest Province. What we will do is we will try to take advantage of some time and perhaps briefly go to through KZN as well as Mpumalanga, so that we cover everyone here today. So we'll try to manage the time as best as possible to make sure we get all of that done. And of course, I see there's a lot of time set for questions and answers, and perhaps we can respond directly to that. So I'm going to hand over to Tubile, who's going to take us through the Eastern Cape. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vanuja. Greetings to the Honourable Chair, greetings to the Honourable Members. I'll start on slide 4 for the Eastern Cape. So this gives you a snapshot of the performance of the Eastern Cape starting from the last term of the previous administration, 2018-19. You can see the Eastern Cape has made strides in the area of your financial reporting. They started the administration with 5 clean audits. They peaked in 2022-2023 to 12 clean audits, and then we had 3 regressions over the 2023-2024 audit cycle, sitting with 9 clean audits. We also have 9 audits that have unqualified with findings, which is an improvement from the 11 when the administration took over. We've also seen a reduction in the number of audits with qualified audit outcomes. They started the administration with 5, and now there are 3 left. So you can see there are strides that have made regarding the financial reporting. So as we go through the slides, you'll see the recurring theme really is the service delivery issues, which we are picking up, and then the non-compliance and the financial losses that emanate from there. So you can see over the term of the administration, they managed 7 improvements, netted off against 2 regressions. So there has been an overall improvement over the term of administration. Slide 3 will go into detail in terms of where the auditees are placed. So we can start on the improved. So in the last audit cycle, we saw 3 improvements. Department of Transport had been on a qualified audit opinion over a number of years. Really what was holding them back was their failure to disclose all their fruitless and wasteful expenditure. So last year they did manage to disclose their fruitless and wasteful expenditure, mainly driven by overpayments for their scholar transport services, as well as overpayments on construction of roads. So those fruitless and wasteful expenditures, we issued 3 material irregularities in that regard for those losses. Maibuye Transport Corporation also improved to an unqualified with findings opinion from a qualified in the previous year. So they were only qualified for 1 year and then they managed to bounce back up. Eastern Cape Rural Development Agency improved to a qualified opinion. There had previously been a disclaimer of opinion. They had issues in the 2022-23 financial year where they submitted financial statements that could not tie up to the supporting records and the general ledger and the trial balance. So we couldn't audit, we couldn't express an opinion in that year. They did manage to resolve some of those issues. They've managed then to get a qualified audit opinion. We did note that there was issues around senior management there. A lot of them were under suspension because of allegations of financial misconduct. So that lack of senior leadership has contributed to their controls not working effectively. On the right-hand side, we see the regressed. So you can see the audits that regressed over the 23-24 cycle were the clean audits. Office of the Premier had been clean maybe for 1 or 2 years. Then they regressed. They couldn't account for their performance reporting accurately. Some of the achievements that they had reported could not be supported by valid and credible information. The provincial legislature also regressed from clean to unqualified with findings. They had issues around not paying their suppliers within 30 days. Then that attracted a non-compliance, and they lost their clean in that regard. Then we also had sports, recreation, arts and culture. They had been clean for a number of years. They were tripped up by supply chain management findings, whereby their bid adjudication committees were not constituted in line with their policies, which then attracted a finding and led to irregular expenditure. On the ones that are unchanged, the ones that are of biggest concern to us are education and health. They have been qualified over a number of years. The efforts that they've put in to move out of that qualification have not borne fruit. Education is unable to account for their immovable, tangible capital assets. They don't have supporting documents for some of the costs. They've tried to use the valuation methodology, which is allowed by MCS, but they have not been able to support that adequately either. So we've qualified them in that regard. Health has also been qualified over a number of years. They have not been able to account for their contingent liabilities. They have got massive medical legal claims amounting to 23 billion. So their record management system in accounting for that is not does not support the credible financial reporting. As a result, they've also been qualified. We've got a number of audits that are clean that have remained unchanged. So some of them have been clean for a very long time, such as the provincial Treasury, Kucha, Department of Safety, EC Parks and Tourism, and then some of the others have joined more recently within the term of administration. Then there are those that have stagnated on unqualified with findings. So those are the ones that hopefully should be making a move towards being clean, but they're held up by issues. Eastern Cape Development Corporation, for example, has got issues on revenue management. They are not collecting the revenue from their properties. Human Settlements has got issues on performance. Public Works has also got issues on performance, similarly to social development. So you can see those are the ones that are close to clean. So clean is an aspiration, but beyond that, we also look at service delivery, which is then part of really our strategy in terms of our culture shift to see that the audit outcomes are also really translating to service delivery. We can go to slide 6. This talks in a bit more detail about some of the issues we've identified on performance reporting. So you can see the performance reporting is an issue for the province. If they could sort this out, you'll see a few more audits becoming clean. So the auditees submitted 11 annual performance reports that had material misstatements. Then after adjustments, only 8 had material findings reported on performance information, and then 13 had no findings. So you'll find that those 8, is one of the main reasons they're not clean is because of this performance reporting. So what's the impact of performance reporting that's not accurate? So throughout the year, management, the executive authority are making decisions in these performance reports, but they are not accurate. So then it means that the decision-making ability is also then impacted. Then it's also highlighting a continued reliance on the audit process, whereby really it's the auditors that are picking up the issues before they make the adjustments. So we've put some examples of some of the issues that we identified on performance reporting. An example is at education. They didn't include performance indicators for 2 critical MTSF objectives, mainly learners being enrolled in publicly funded schools that can read for meaning, as well as improved school readiness of children and their access to early childhood development services. So then obviously those objectives are not being tracked. Then the department is obviously going to lag behind in meeting its medium-term strategic framework objectives. We have some other examples at ECRDA where the performance indicators were not measurable. We had examples at Health, Education, Office of the Premier, Social Development, Public Works, and the Rural Development Agency, where the reported performance information was not complete, as in there should have been more reported, but they ended up reporting less. Then at ECRDA, we identified indicators and targets that were not clearly defined so that it can be measured consistently throughout the year. Slide 7, I think, has more examples of some of the issues that we are identifying on the performance reporting. We've also put some examples of the nature of some of the indicators that we've indicated were material misstated. But at the bottom of the slide 7, we're highlighting some of the MTSF targets that are at a risk of not being met. At education, the number of children accessing early childhood development services, the MTSF target was 2.9 million. After 4 years, they've only achieved 101,000. And then at human settlements, the MTSF target of phase 3 upgrading of informal settlements program, the UISP, their target was 1,500. At the end of the year 4, they had reported 0 on that. So you can see what was indicating at the beginning of the slide. We do encounter service delivery issues in the Eastern Cape, and that needs particular attention to be paid to. Slide 8 talks through some of the work that we've done on the infrastructure delivery project. So we did some work at education, where we looked at construction of a hostel and the completion of a school. At health, we looked at the construction of a clinic. At human settlements, we looked at the construction of houses in Nguza Hill. And then at transport, we looked at the upgrading and blading of gravel roads by transport. So the common findings that we're identifying in our infrastructure projects is delays in project completion, invalid variation orders, payments that are made but value for money not being received, quality defects on the projects, and then underutilization of the completed projects. So some of the root causes that we're identifying that lead to these findings. At human settlements, for example, we identified that management did not oversee proper contract management with regards to non-performing contractors. At transport, we identified poor monitoring, evaluation, oversight, and quality controls over the construction of those roads. At education, there was a failure by the principal agent to discharge their duties, and the department failed to refund the implementing agent for work that they had paid for, therefore resulting in some contractual obligations not being met. At health, we identified delayed payments to the contractor and delayed action against the poor performing contractor, as well as ongoing restrictions on the recruitment of staff. So some of the impacts that we've seen at education, the project regarding the school has been delayed for over 5 years, resulting in non-compliance. with the South African Schools Act of providing minimum education areas. Also for the hostel, we identified that there's non-maintenance, which will reduce the lifespan of the hostel buildings, resulting in ineffective and inefficient and uneconomical use of resources and further costs to refurbish the school sooner than is required. At health, with the delays in the clinic, it's also resulting in a delay in service delivery. Patients then have to be transported to other hospitals. At human settlements, the delayed project completion was set to be completed in 25 months, but now has been in progress for over 9 years and it's still not complete. At Department of Transport, identified that the department accepted and paid for substandard work from the contractors. The substandard quality control of the gravel and poor stormwater provision could result in the roads requiring earlier than anticipated maintenance. So it's basically you keep on maintaining and spending money. At health, on slide 9, we wanted to highlight the extent of the medical legal claims. So you can see for the 2023-24 cycle, they had disclosed 22.3 billion medical legal claims as contingent liabilities, and during that year, 23-24, they paid out 340 million in settling the medical legal claims. So you can see what's really happening is those medical legal claims are not budgeted for. What they end up having to do then is pay through money that was budgeted for service delivery, and they end up having to settle these medical legal claims. So you find non-achievement of targets, you are finding unauthorized expenditure. So that is really a concern for us in the Department of Health, because that balance seems unmanageable, really driven by factors. One, they struggle to defend their medical legal claims when they go to court because their records are not up to date. So you find that some of the records are missing, they can't defend in court. And two, obviously, it is driven by some medical negligence. So maybe you find that the investigations around identifying the responsibility and who should have done what also take long, which then slows down the process of putting corrective measures to rectify that situation. I'll briefly touch on slide 10, talking to the issues we've identified in education, on them implementing their school curriculum. So what we're really saying there is that there isn't effective communication between the parents and the learners, the parents and the teachers around the learner performance. There's lack of learner performance discussions. The schools are not adequately utilizing their management processes to identify and address challenges of poor performance. So this is due to policies at schools not being sufficiently detailed around parental involvement. Schools don't have policies that guide them or enforce them towards rewarding learners, and then oversight mechanisms at schools are not ensuring that critical factors that impact the learners are adequately discussed. So those are some of the issues we've identified on the implementation of the school curriculum. Slide 11 provides a view on the ICT environment in the province. So at health, we identified that systems are underutilized or are not functioning in the hospitals. There's a lack of internet and connectivity at the district hospitals and the clinics that we visited. There's poor IT infrastructure at the hospitals with inadequate disaster recovery plans, and the administration of medicines and patient records are done manually with no use of systems or technology to adequately record the information and report on it. At education, we've identified system weaknesses and deficiencies in key departments such as the learner database and the infrastructure asset system. The IT infrastructure at head office and districts and the schools is also old and non-responsive to new technologies, and then connectivity and network also remains an issue. At Department of Transport, they developed a system to manage the learner transport, but that's not being utilized. The transport service providers actually did not want to participate in that, so they've spent that money, and now the scholar transport operators don't want to use that system. So those are some of the challenges that we are identifying in the province around ICT. terms of slide 12, talks to some of the expenditure issues that we're identifying. So in the province, we identified 467 million unauthorized expenditure over the 23-24 audit cycle. We identified 2.7 billion in irregular expenditure, 148 million in fruitless and wasteful expenditure. Overall, we have identified 30 material irregularities since the beginning of the process in 2019, with estimated financial losses of 197 million. Some of the issues that we identify are poor payment practices, where there's late payments to suppliers, resulting in interest. We're identifying payments of goods and services that are not received. Also, the quality of the spending remains challenging, as funds are spent, but there's no visible impact on the service delivery. We're identifying unfair and uncompetitive procurement processes, identifying inadequate needs analysis and project management, leading to standing time, delays in project completion, appointed service providers not delivering, and projects being abandoned due to poor planning and coordination. We've also identified limited benefit being used in terms being received in terms of software licenses and IT systems that are not being used. We've also identified ineffective maintenance of infrastructure. The approach seems to be reactive rather than proactive. There's limited conditional assessments being performed, poor infrastructure delivery, increased costs and financial losses. We're also identifying theft and vandalism. So this slide is, of course, for concern in terms of the quality then of the expenditure of the funds that are given to our provincial audits. Slide 13 talks to our material irregularities. So since 2019, we've issued 31 material irregularities on the provincial government. 30 of them related to financial loss, estimated 197 million. One related to substantial harm at health, as they were not able to account for their performance management system, which then results in substantial harm to the public sector institution. Over the years, there are 19 MIs that have been resolved. We've had some strong action being taken at Kocha. For an example, there was an employee that had committed fraud. So that employee, they attached his pension fund, was prosecuted and sentenced to jail. So you've seen some strong actions. We saw transport as well, where there was payment for a truck that wasn't received. So they did attempt to recover some of the funds. The employed staff, they had their salaries docked, and then one of them was demoted to a lower level. So we do see some actions taking, but they do sometimes tend to take long. Where we get stuck is where the departments and the entities try to recover the monies from the suppliers. It always ends up in a legal process, and then it drags out that process. But we do see some traction. We had an MI that was at recommendations at health. Then they did manage to implement their recommendations, and then that material irregularity was subsequently resolved. Slide 14 is really an assessment of the coordinating institutions. At Office of the Premier, we've identified that they did regress from their clean audit opinion due to performance information. We've also identified that despite them spending funds on broadband and Microsoft licenses for the province, the provincial departments are not necessarily using those services. Provincial Treasury, we've identified that they have performed a lot of interventions at the municipalities relating to financial recovery plans, support on unfunded budgets, assessing the Section 71 and 72 reports, placing technical advisors at identified municipalities, and also supporting the implementation of the consequence management framework through capacitating and disciplinary boards. So obviously, those efforts are not always translating into improvements in the municipal space, so those need to be tightened up. COCTA as well is assisting with the municipalities in terms of the dysfunctional municipalities, even though we didn't see an improvement in those. Funding and capacity remains one of the major factors that lead to a lack of preparedness and readiness for disaster management. So we saw over there some disasters in the Eastern Cape that were not well managed. The department has not yet adopted the national framework on the professionalization of the public sector. So we did some work on that, so we can see very slow traction in terms of the professionalization framework. So some work needs to be done by the Department of Auditor in that regard. And at legislature, they also regressed from their clean opinion, identified that the portfolio committees did not implement consequence management on departments that did not respond to their resolutions, and the committees did not always track and monitor key infrastructure projects. Then slide 15 talks to the recommendations that we made to the coordinating institutions. Office of the Premier, we recommended that they should ensure that they provide adequate oversight and coordination in managing key ICT projects in the province. We encourage that the performance reporting should continue to be more output-based so that it's got a visible impact within the province. And to further enhance usefulness and transparency, the Office of the Premier should also implement proper checks and balances of information that it's receiving from the departments that are providing it information that is then reported in their annual performance report. At Provincial Treasury, we recommended that develop an integrated plan that includes all three spheres of government to address disclaimer, dysfunctional and financially distressed municipalities. The existing political intervention steering committee should focus on consequence management as well as non-implementation in of the financial recovery plans, the lack of improvement in the tabling of unfunded budgets, and the disclaimer audits that also require intervention. COCTA, we've recommended that they need to have a clearly defined approach regarding the professionalization framework, and then they must also ensure that their performance indicators are more output-based so that they can have visible impact. Accounting officers should ensure that the MSIP implementation reports describe the challenges that are experienced in responding to the problems raised, and then that the accounting officer should ensure that challenges and proposed support interventions are determined so that they can improve the municipal performance, as well as making sure that the support provided addresses these challenges. Legislature, we recommended that they should develop a system that ensures that the validation of the payments is done within the 30 days that is prescribed. We recommended the portfolio committees should follow up on the non-responsive departments. We recommended that the portfolio committees improve their oversight processes in holding departments and entities accountable for key infrastructure projects that are not being delivered. Slide 16 is the commitments that were made by the MEC Premier. I think we can skip that. And then slide 17 talks to our overall recommendations of the three key issues we identified. So in terms of the continued transgressions, officials should be clear on their performance, on their responsibilities and the performance that is expected of them, as well as the consequences for those transgressions. Leadership should consistently but fairly implement policies and procedures of the institution that relate to consequence management. In terms of inadequate performance reporting and service delivery, we recommend that they enhance transparency and accountability through clear reporting systems and oversight, while strengthening data management with improved technology, staff training, and using citizens' feedback to improve service delivery. And then for poor expenditure, we recommend the political administration and the political and administrative leadership to enforce strict oversight and accountability measures over financial management disciplines, while also streamlining and standardizing procurement processes to eliminate efficiencies and prevent potential inflated costs. Thank you, Honorable Chairperson. That's it for the Eastern Cape presentation. We're going to the Northwest.
Thank you, Chairperson, and greetings to the members of the committee, the colleagues from National Treasury and the colleagues from our office. Whilst We're trying to get the presentation up. I just perhaps Chair, maybe let me start by painting the picture of how the Northwest Province is looking like from an audit outcomes point of view. So I've got about 15 minutes. So what I'm going to do, I'll split that time into half, paint the picture, and then from there run through the slides very quickly. So building from what Ms. Maharaj alluded to and spoke to. She said we cover a number of things when we do the audit. So when you look and against what she listed, the areas that we audit, maybe let me start with the financial reporting aspect. That's the aspect that she started with. It's the financial reporting, is the compliance, AOPO. Let me start there. So looking at either last year or a year or 5 years before, I think there has been, in the Northwest, there has been deliberate efforts by EXCO and Treasury to try and target auditees. They identified about 5 auditees and said, these are the 5 auditees that are currently sitting in financially unqualified with findings that we want to push to a clean audit opinion over a period of 5 years. So from a financial reporting point of view. So I think that over time has borne some fruit of some sort, because what we are seeing from that, and that slide to a certain extent talks to that. What we are seeing from 1920, there has been about 7 improvements. Compared to last year, there's about 4. But specifically there, they had 5. They wanted to push some of these through the support from Treasury. And I must just put that into context, because when we had a conversation with the political leadership, and I said those were initiatives of the provincial treasury, and the leaders within EXCO corrected me to say that's not provincial treasury. It's an EXCO decision which then provincial treasury drives. So I think that context is important. So from there, what we are seeing, they have then since added about 2 additional clean audit, which is the sports as well as the legislature. And I think legislature for them, it was a big thing in the sense that it was the first clean audit ever since the dawn of democracy. That was the thing. So it was a big thing, and we had provincial treasury. Obviously, it's the accounting officers within these departments reciprocating the support, commitment to be supported by provincial treasury. So that I think assisted them. From others that were sitting in the qualification, 5 years ago, you would have had human settlement sitting as a disclaimer, and a number of ODTs sitting as financially qualified. Those, we have since then seen those moving, and with only one that is still sitting in a qualified audit space, which is education. I think attention is needed there for that one to move out of that space. So that slide does summarize that. So that's the financial reporting aspect, the debits and credits on how they account for their transactions. That's part one. Then the second part is, which is then the big however. There's this big improvement from a financial reporting point of view. Then the however comes with the rest of the things that Ms. Maharaj spoke about. We'll talk about compliance. And I think obviously we are honest when we talk about these things. And I don't think compliance has been a priority. I'll be just honest and frank, and it's the conversation that we would have had with the leaders within the province itself. I don't think it has been a priority. The priority has been spending and making sure that they spend on service delivery related initiatives and all those things. But in doing that, I think then there were lapses in ensuring that the compliance aspect is paid attention to. That is critical, Chair. Critical in the sense that once you get the compliance aspect lacking, then it has got a ripple effect in a number of things. And you'll see when I go through the slides quickly, that, for example, the non-compliance aspect relating to supply chain management processes number one, as well as procurement and contract management compliance related areas. The SCM related and compliance, that is going to have a huge impact, honorable members, on the irregular expenditure that you will see on the slide, which has not been attended to, because it starts where they have to make sure that compliance is given attention. So that's that part. Or it has also got a spillover effect on how the contracts are managed, for, because you say procurement and contract management. You want these projects to be managed properly. So you'll see on the slides that talk to service delivery aspect. That's the aspect as well. The second, the next part, which also results from this, when you get to the financial, no, not financial, performance information, the credibility of performance information, because there are aspects that you need to comply with, at least from a strategic planning point of view and how you execute that. If you're not going to be paying attention to compliance, that is going to have a spillover effect as well in such area, and you'll see the credibility of financial reporting issues that we are reporting there. And the fourth part is the regular expenditure that is not actually attended to. Ms. Maharaj also spoke about the internal control processes and other things that sit in there. What we try to do to respond to these things, obviously we issue material irregularities. I mean, I think we've seen traction in some that we have been able to resolve, or at least get the objectives and the things that we wanted to achieve with those MIs. But the ones that have not responded, or those that are lagging behind, are actually the ones that are slow in any case in responding to what we are dealing with. So that is the picture that I wanted to paint from a province point of view. What we've done, we've split the presentation between, now I'm just going to go straight into the slides and highlight at a high level, not we've got a number of slides that are sitting in there, but the details are included in there. And during the questions and answer, I can cover things that I might not have covered there. I think I've covered the slides, and it's clear how the outcomes have moved. So they've done well here. On the next slide, we've split it between the entities and the departments. So we've got about 15 entities up until 22-23, and we had 2 that were merged, the Parks Board and the Tourism Board, and that's why we are now sitting with the 14. But what I want to highlight here is that when you look at the entities, 2 things that I want to highlight. It's the regressions that we have seen. And that regression, it resulted really from one entity because of a number of things that happened. One, the fire that happened, the GLR group entity, the fire that happened, which then had an implications on how other entities are accounting for those things. Then that's in the main, but that's not the only thing. From a processes point of view, I think there are things that can be fixed as well from an entity's perspective. That's one aspect. The second aspect is that in the province, we've got entities that are struggling financially, that cannot self-sustain, and others have got an opportunity to self-sustain, but until that is given time, they're not going to be able to. So what that means is that they are going to be getting money from the fiscus. So that's, and the last point, we've got the problem child, which is the NTI group, the entity for buses, which had not submitted financial statements since 1920 financial year. But with provincial treasury trying to assist, I think eventually last year they were able to prepare the financial statements for 1920 only. The rest of the years have not been submitted. The problem that remains, Chair and honorable members, is that we have not been able to audit that because of what is happening from an accounting officer at the leadership level within that entity. We've not started. Yes, they've prepared the financial statement, submitted, but through then the provincial treasury, we were asked not to start with that audit because there is no one to deal within that entity whilst they are dealing with their issues there. On the next slide, This is just now the summary of what I have dealt with, Honorable Chair, with the movements. It tells you who has moved to clean and who stayed where. What the one point I want to raise, elevate here, is that now with the effort that has been put into driving the shift from bad audit outcomes to better audit outcomes. Now we are sitting with a number of auditees sitting in under financially unqualified, the yellow zone, as we refer to them. What it means then basically, as Treasury targeted certain entities, I think that is now the area that they need to continue to look at and say which of those auditees that are sitting there that they would want to move out. Obviously, you would want them to pay attention to the entities that regressed, especially the entities, because you want them to be able to self-sustain. And on the next slide, I've spoken to this. These are the drivers of the audit outcomes, and it indicates how they got to the clean and those that are sitting in the yellow zone and those that have regressed. So I think I've covered this one. I'll move on to the next slide. Now, this is the performance information which I have already covered from a credibility point of view. What I just want to elevate here is what we are trying to do, Chair and honorable members, and we will continue to do, is that as we audit and the audit outcomes sometimes improve. As audit outcomes improve and people, start complain about different things and say, but the service delivery is not improving and. Obviously, there aren't going to be direct linkages, but what we are trying to do is to say, okay, let's take a step back and say, what are people expecting? Based on what people are expecting, what is the mandate of this entity or these entities? To what extent do we have the things that people are expecting featuring in or falling within the mandate? If that is fine, so what is then the problem? Why is the department not delivering on that? So and I think my colleague Tobile covered the genesis behind what we are trying to do with this slide. What I just want to talk to there is, I think for us, is the Department of Agriculture and Department of Education, where we looked at the strategic document, we looked at what they have in their planning documents. There are those areas that they still need to include within their APPs and start delivering on. What we also looked at, we said, look, there is spending, but to what extent are this department spending at the same time us seeing a shift in the attainment of the set targets and the things that they wanted to achieve? And that's what we will continue to look at that, because currently there's a bit of a disjuncture if you look at the numbers and what we have there, where the budget is spent, but when you look at what is achieved is way less than that. That's just what I wanted to elevate here. The rest of the details are there. On the next slide, so these are the entities. I've spoken to this one from a performance point of view. There are opportunities for these entities to do better on the credibility of financial reporting. For example, you look at some of, say, the three entities under that group and their subsidiaries that did not even prepare the annual report. So it's the basic things that some of the entities will have to get right for them to get the performance information right. But in the province, you do want to see the governance structures established, as well as the executive supporting the sustainability of and the continuity within those entities. I'll move on to the next slide. So I'll pause a bit on this one. So if when it comes to us as the auditors in the Northwest Province, and you ask us and to say what keeps you awake at night, these are areas that are keeping us awake at night, and I think these are areas that are also keeping the citizens on the ground awake at night, and I'm sure they are also keeping the leadership, and they should be keeping the leadership awake at night. The first one is the provincial road infrastructure that is not adequately maintained. And it's something that we've tried to deal with, as I've indicated next to that point, to say, to date, we have issued a material irregularity that the Department of Public Works is trying to deal with that, because we want to see the maintenance of roads infrastructure in the province maintained in a systematic and a methodical manner, so that even if the budget is not sufficient, but when the budget is spent, you want to see something coming out of that and the value out of that. What we've also looked at, which worries us, it's a rural province, honorable members. So you've got little ones that are dependent on the scholar transport to get there. So we paid attention to that. We went there and said, okay, how is this transport looking like from a reliability and the safety? We found out a number of issues there, which I will quickly reflect on the next slide. But we have also since issued a material irregularity on that, which the COSATMA department is dealing with. Infrastructure overall, not necessarily now the roads, that's number 3. You say you've got the infrastructure. When you build the infrastructure, but to what extent are you maintaining? Even the older hospital, here we make an example for a hospital, to say to what extent is the province and the public works and those that are responsible for this maintaining that. You'll see that's the area of our concern. And the last 2, the backlogs in the housing, as well as the significant delays in the projects. On the next slide, this is now just the example of one of the provincial roads. I mean, you can see the condition and how the road is looking like, but it's not, this is just one of those areas that we have visited for us to lead to the material irregularity that we issued. I've dealt with this slide at a high level. The previous one deals with, not the previous, the next one deals with the scholar transport that I spoke to. There we visited the buses, the top left corner, that is the buses, the floor of the bus, it's got the holes in there, but it's carrying the little ones. So you can tell that the condition is not at the right level. The seats that you have there, or even the fire extinguishers, and the overloading. So these are the areas, and we've obviously, with this, we've issued the material irregularity there. And the good thing when the new administration came in is when we were issuing this MI, and it's a conversation we had with the MEC to say, MEC, whether you are new or not, you are taking over, and we are going to issue this MI. So this is what you need to pay attention to. On the next one, so this is an example of a hospital that we visited with infrastructure, lack of maintenance there. I think I've dealt with this one, and the details are in there. The next one, I think 2 projects, it's the delayed projects. We have spoken about this, and even the Auditor General herself has dealt with this one and the previous one. It's the Mabato Nursing College that was delayed. But with what it means is that now the college is not, the province, the leaders in the province are not able to achieve what they wanted to achieve with the college if it's not completed on time. That's, in the main, that's what that means. On the next one, it's also on the delayed projects. It's from housing. There's a lot that people are expecting from a housing perspective. 300 planned, 102 done, and then the supply disappears and the project is then delayed. Those are some of the things that we are worried about, and I think I did touch on this one. The next one is the fiscal pressure. Fiscal pressure. You look at the entities versus the departments. I think from a department's perspective, it would seem like the things are a bit better on paper, but what they need to focus on is on prudent spending. And it's the conversation, and I think because you do not want a situation where departments are spending for the sake of spending because they don't want to return money back to fiscus, but you want the spending of money to be spent on the things that are going to be meaningful and what is going to achieve something from the citizens' perspective. But from the entity's perspective, a lot still needs to be done there. What I am aware of, based on the conversations that we've had with the leaders in the province, is that that's what EXCO and the provincial treasury is paying attention to through the department, the DDET entity, with the MEC that is responsible for that. They are going to be paying attention to how the departments or the entities are going to be turned around to be self-sufficient, because it's not going to help the province for them to be dependent on the departments. On the next one, I just wanted to give an example here. I said with non-compliance, there is a lot that happens in the space, and this is exactly the example of those things. If you're spending but you're not paying attention to the compliance aspect, you are going to find yourself then spending about, on average, about 3 billion incurred irregular expenditure, because you are not paying attention to what that does. You're going to see irregular expenditure growing from 29 to 37, which is over a period 10 billion growth, instead of leaders addressing that, and which is also then talking to consequence management. Consequence management comes from the provisions of the legislation to say, once you have irregular expenditure, this is what is expected of you to do to address that. So the important part is not to trivialize what is happening in here, to say, because as people are spending without complying with the laws and regulations, it does become a difficult one, because there might actually be bigger issues behind the non-compliance and the numbers that we are seeing, which will be seen through the investigations. And if that is not happening, then that becomes an issue. On the next one, these are material irregularities. I think this is the second last slide. Material irregularities, we've issued 39 to date, able to resolve 25 based on what we wanted to achieve and what the MIs had achieved, and we've seen some traction, but there are those that have not moved the way we had wanted to see them, and you'll see those ones are either referred or closer to, I guess, they're either remedial action. Remedial action means if nothing is still done on that, we are getting closer to something that is not ideal, the certificate of debt, but if we need to get there, eventually that's where we're going to get to. And on the last, I think the last slide. So what we would have done, we would have issued recommendations per department and given to all departments the recommendations and the things that we want them to do. And then at a provincial level, also did the same thing. So here it's just the summation of the things per category of what we wanted to talk to that we have summarized in here. And I think the slide is self-explanatory, the Honorable Chair and members. I think that is the end of what I am able to share this morning. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you so much to Tobile as well as Mutoko. Chair, I'll be guided by you. We've covered the two provinces that you mentioned that you wanted us to prioritize this morning. We are ready to go with Mpumalanga and Eastern Cape, and you probably saw that the slides are very similar and easy to follow, but we will be guided by yourself.
Thanks very much, Ms. Maharaj. Unfortunately, the time allocated to you it does not allow us to give you a chance. Maybe what we can do will give the National Treasury, then we'll see as time goes on how it's going to take us to. But because in terms of our program, every department was given its allocated time, the 50. So, Mayor Howard.
Thank you, Chair. As Michael Ramavi is connecting, thank you very much for the opportunity. So you will see that our presentation has all the provinces. I think we missed the part of Northwest, but we will emphasize on Eastern Cape and Northwest because we do have the information for all of those here. So just to say that in terms of the spending, where provinces are at the moment, the report we're presenting today is for end of February. So I think timing of the meetings are important, Honorable Chairperson, because the financial year just ended. And next week, we're expecting provinces to submit end of the financial year information. So I think maybe in the future, if we could look into end of the quarter so that we can, not immediately, but just give us maybe towards the end of the month, then we're ready with information. So, so I think that's going to be important because it would have been nice that we do present at the end of the financial year. But what we'll do, because as members will recall that at the end of each quarter, we publish section 32. We publish quarterly the provincial expenditure information, mainly on the provincial departments, including conditional grant spending and all of that. What we'll do, we'll share that report with the committee so that as you go to these two provinces, you do have the end of the year expenditure as well. Over to you, Michael.
Good morning, Honorable Chairperson, Honorable members, colleagues from the Auditor General, and of course, my colleague Hello from the National Treasury. My name is Michael Ramabi from the National Treasury, Acting Chief Director, Provincial Budget Analysis. So this will be the overview of the presentation that I'm going to make, and possibly not touching the third last, as our colleagues from Auditor General possibly have done so, and that is their space. Just to look at the fiscal So just looking at the fiscal framework. So the fiscal framework, on the receipt side, that is where we would have equitable share, conditional grants, and those are the transfers from national government. And of course, the own revenue that is raised by provinces themselves. And then of course, from the receipt side, that is where they start allocating money to departments. And the bottom line is either the surplus or the deficit position. And of course, if we look at the provinces that we should be focusing on, Eastern Cape, we can see in the first year of the MTF, they're tabling a deficit budget of 506 million rand. And the outer 2 years is surplus positions. But of course, in terms of section 227 of the PFMA and 215 of the Constitution, provinces are not allowed to table deficit budgets. They must indicate proposals in terms of how they're going to finance those, as we can see in that first year where Eastern Cape, for instance, is tabling a deficit. So they are financing that from their own cash reserves, which they've added 786 million rand there. So in the case of Northwest, we can see also in the first year that they've got a deficit of 17 million rand, and they've added money from their own cash reserves there. So, but overall, if we look at the equitable share, despite us not having added money over the current MTF period, so the equitable share allocation is growing by 4.5% over the 2025 MTF period. From the conditional grant side, it might look like there's a decline, but it's simply because of the provincial roads maintenance grant. So the incentive portion that is not allocated there, that will be allocated, of course, depending on how provinces perform. And then on own revenue, of course, we do know that provinces at times become very conservative when they project own revenue. So most of the times they over-collect, but they project minimal growth. So in terms of the deficits, for the two provinces that are taking big deficits there, which is Gauteng and Western Cape, as we can see, the Gauteng, to a large extent, will know that the obligations that are there for them to pay 30% of the e-tolls, and they are going to finance that from the reserves, and some of the monies they will actually be borrowing as they move forward. And then as the case of the Western Cape is the asset financing reserve that they have there, where as provinces or departments put together projects that are shovel ready, they're able to then allocate that money. So on own revenue, which is the monies that provinces collect, I mean, a big chunk of what they collect comes from motor vehicle license fees. So which we can see it accounts for instance, 14 billion rand of the 25 billion that the provinces are projecting to collect in the current financial year. So as I said, even in the previous slide, that they normally become conservative. They do over collect most of the years. And then of course, even in terms of interest, as departments continue to underspend, especially on infrastructure, when we will look at the slide that talks about the performance of infrastructure, they underperform. And then on the interest side, because then Treasury ends up not allocating that money, then they accumulate interest as a result of that. So there are a couple of enhancement strategies that provinces have put together, and we have put in this presentation an annexure that details those enhancement initiatives by province. So just as a summary in terms of the enhancement initiatives that provinces have, so they're talking, for instance, about automating services where it actually becomes easier for people to renew their motor vehicle licenses. You don't have to go and queue anymore. You can renew online. So those are some of the strategies. An example. So the resorts which we have visited last year. So we have seen that a couple of these resorts actually are not well looked after. They are not well maintained. Although provinces want to bring in the private sector to partner with them to be able to make these resorts operational, they still need to actually invest in maintenance in the space. And of course, the annual review of tariffs, which is what they do. And then the assets, for instance, we would have seen, I mean, in the case in CBDs where some of these assets that are not well looked after, so where there is illegal occupation of these assets. So there is process that was actually setting some of those things. And of course, the government buildings that are either rented by government officials, rented by business in poor conditions, government needs to invest in that space. And then, of course, improving the collection in the health sector. As I mean, most of the times they under collect on patient fees. So, of course, appointing case managers to follow up on that collection becomes very, very important there. And then, of course, there are some leakages that do happen, especially in facilities that could collect revenue, where, for instance, if there are no controls in hospitals, and then people can actually collect that money and then it disappears in the system. And then making sure that there are those controls then becomes important. And of course, there are considerations in some instances to license private healthcare facilities that provide services. And of course, in the case of the agencies that do collect motor vehicle license fees on behalf of provinces, which is mostly municipalities and post office, so there is a tendency in most of the instances of municipalities collecting this revenue and not surrendering it back to provinces. And we have seen in many provinces where they are starting to take over that function actually from municipalities, which will result in loss of revenue on behalf of this local sphere of government. And of course, the new driver's license testing centers, which are being built and operationalized in provinces. So the impoundment of facilities that are either being identified or being built anew. So where unroadworthy vehicles, for instance, or if people illegally park on the roads, so they are impounded, and as a result, you have to pay money to actually release those vehicles. So that's one of the enhancement strategies. And of course, the way bridges, where we got trucks that do overload, they damage the roads. So this way bridges, for them to be operationalized, a couple of them are not operational. So them being upgraded to be in good conditions, and of course putting the staffing, the traffic officers and the necessary equipments that will weigh these vehicles is an important one. And of course, where donor funding is available, those are the options that are being explored. And of course, developing the forecasting models to actually project on revenue. So, in terms of the economic growth and then job creation strategies, I mean, what we also tried to do was to summarize in terms of the budgets that were presented by provinces in March. And then, of course, the state of the provinces address, also looking at the budget speeches that were actually presented by honorable MECs for finances. So, in terms of the economic growth and job creation agenda, so of course, all of these things aim to address the developmental challenges that are faced by us as a country. And then, of course, provinces do differ. And in these differences, so each region has got its own unique opportunities, it has got its own constraints, and then, of course, strategies that they foster to promote economic growth and employment. So they do tailor those strategies according to their unique circumstances. And then, of course, depending on the resources that they have, that the support that they get from national, the geographical advantages, and of course, that shapes obviously the areas that they want to focus on. Maybe in this one, just to touch on the two provinces that we are focusing on. In the case of Eastern Cape, for instance, I mean, they are investing in economic infrastructure, which is something that is happening across all provinces. Investment in roads and rail, in ports, SEZ, for instance, where we have got the East London SEZ, we have got the Guha SEZ, where they invest in that space, the industrial parks, the agri-hubs, and of course, building critical skills and innovation is some of the economic drivers that the province plans to focus on. And of course, accessing finance where it's available and the markets, and then whether it's about supporting agriculture in that space to access the markets is one of the things that is being focused on. Of course, the days of doing business where you don't overregulate, I mean, and then make it easy for business to actually invest in a province. And of course, some of the priorities there, again, talking about automotive SEZs, where either you have got the mechanics in rural areas in the province, that you support them to either be able to maintain or repair cars, to manufacture the parts and so forth. Investment in renewable energy, agriculture and agro-processing, and of course, as I indicated, social infrastructure, both economic and social, in education, health, transport, and so forth. And of course, the challenges, I mean, as I think even the colleagues who say from the AG, when they talk overall about infrastructure backlog, is a problem across the country. I mean, even if we look at the conditions, as the colleagues were presenting the conditions of our roads, so those are worrisome and so forth. And I mean, the part of the visits that we conducted ourselves from the National Treasury side, we have seen that in all 9 provinces, I mean, the conditions of the roads actually have deteriorated. And of course, crime, which is a big threat to whatever we do, and the high levels of unemployment based on the quarterly labor force survey. And of course, I will just jump to Northwest in this case in terms of the key economic drivers, which is mining, agro-processing, manufacturing, and of course, tourism as well as infrastructure. So the priorities that they identify is actually the need to actually release provincial land for tourism investment. And then part of tourism includes upgrading and renovation of Johannesburg Airport. And of course, the priority is in the areas of mining, infrastructure, and agro-processing. But the challenges in this space, again, the very poor road network, again, as was presented by colleagues from the Auditor General. So the infrastructure is aging. And of course, I mean, across the board, there is insufficient professional people. Whether we talk about engineers, I mean, of course, they compare depending on what government pays and vis-a-vis what the private sector pays, then they tend to go into the private sector space where they are being paid better than elsewhere. So when we look at the analysis, as Khali has indicated, that we will be looking at the analysis at the end of February in terms of the numbers. If we look at the history, generally, although, I mean, provinces do need money, their pressures, capacity to spend remains a problem, as we can see, even in terms of the history from 2021-22, underspending of 11 billion, 12 billion, 6 billion, projecting currently to overspend by almost 3 billion rand. When we look at the current spending and 90%, the overspending might materialize, but not to the extent that is currently projected. I mean, we know there are pressures, for instance, in KZN, I mean, at 837, but we do doubt that, for instance, in Gauteng at the 1.3 and the other 1.3 in Free State will actually materialize. So Free State has got a tendency of actually prioritizing money from goods and services, from COE, so to say, to goods and services and capex. So, but we don't think that, as have indicated, that if we look at the norm, where they should be in terms of the straight line spending, they should be at 91.7. So the fact that they're at 90, cast some doubts that the overspending of 2.9 billion will actually materialize as such. So if we zoom into compensation of employees, by the way, we have actually attached as part of the annexure that is attached in here, the headcount numbers, just to show, how the personnel numbers have been growing in provinces. So when we look at compensation of employee, which is the biggest cost driver in provinces, that is taking up 61% of the budget, or 470.4 billion rand of that budget. So a big chunk of that money is sitting in two sectors, in education and health. If we look at out of the 470, 410 billion of that, which is 87% of the total, is sitting in these two. This talks about the appointment of educators, doctors, and nurses. So that is where this money is sitting. And of course, the spending is at almost 92%, pressures in 3 provinces, Free State, KZN, Northern Cape. And then, as I said, the headcount numbers are attached. So when we look at the headcount numbers, we would have seen that during the time of COVID, a lot of personnel were actually added. But after COVID, so provinces are struggling to maintain those numbers. And of course, we would have seen the numbers declining as we move forward. So on infrastructure, as I've indicated, the spending is low compared to that norm of over 91% that I've spoken to. So which we do project that there's going to be underspending on infrastructure. So Northern Cape is the only province that is reporting the highest spending. As honorable members will know that Northern Cape has pledged the Human Settlements Development Grant, and they are spending a big chunk of that money now paying back the DBSA. So on new infrastructure generally is lower at almost 78%. So challenges are many. Colleagues from AG have spoken about delays in SCM processes, approval of business plans, especially in the human settlement sector, disruptions by communities and so forth, and there are proposals that have been made there to actually deal with this pressure. And then I'll just try to skip this slide because it talks to the conditional grant spending by grants. As I've indicated, most of these grants that are not performing well are infrastructure conditional grants. But if we look at the history in terms of how, the grants, the performance and the amounts or the monies that provinces have been surrendering back to the National Revenue Fund, we can see that from 2019-20 period analyzed, so 2 billion surrendered back to National Revenue Fund, 2.3, 3.2, 3.4, current financial year 923 million rand. So we can see that each year, so provinces are bringing money back to the National Revenue Fund. And of course, some of the concerns that relates to that is underspending on conditional grants in particular. 12.1 surrendered back over that period. And health, transport, education, human settlements, agriculture, those conditional grants, infrastructure related, is where we see these conditions happening. Of course, there are ramifications or in terms of this underspending. So, or the opportunity costs associated with that, where the conditions of infrastructure worsen, the backlogs increase, and then that opportunity cost becomes a problem. So, because the opportunity of creating jobs, to improving infrastructure would have been lost as a result of that underspending. So all that we are saying is that provinces, before they can even get money for infrastructure, should be able to plan ahead and create a pipeline of projects that are actually shovel ready. So, but before we can stop this money as National Treasury, as we say, they surrender money back to the National Revenue Fund. There's a process where we deal with rollovers. Firstly, we issue a guideline in terms of how we deal with these rollovers. So we give provinces an opportunity to apply for these rollovers of monies that they have unspent. So approval of this rollover is based on them submitting proof that the money is committed to identifiable projects. and then funds that are not committed to any project that we can identify. So those are the monies that are surrendered back to the National Revenue Fund. So in terms of unpaid invoices, we are currently sitting with a balance of 37 billion rand, and I think that is the balance that the Minister of Finance spoke about when he presented the budget, indicating the pressures that are actually in particular in the two departments, in the two sectors, education and health, where education are sitting with accruals amounting to 4.2 billion rand, and then unpaid invoices in health, 21.7 billion rand. And of course, every year before they can spend money on anything else, they must pay the service providers. And then Treasury Regulation 8.2.3 says invoices must be settled within 30 days unless determined otherwise in the contract. And of course, if they don't do that, I mean, it leads to legal and operational consequences where some of the service providers can sue government. The small businesses, of course, that cannot survive not being paid by government, they run out of business, they close shop. And of course, it does strain relationships between the service providers and us as government, that we don't get trusted by business. And at times, that is why even the cost that we pay for some of these things, because they price for risk, we end up paying higher for some of these things. And of course, that interest that they pay as a result of paying these invoices late becomes fruitless and wasteful. Of course, all that we are saying is that provinces must not overcommit money that they do not have. They must procure based on the budget that they have. And of course, they prioritize the long outstanding invoices, because once this invoices are due for more than 30 days, a year, and whatever, you strain again, as we said, those relationships. So you need to prioritize that. And of course, to still show, I mean, these service providers that we care as government, we must still call them and negotiate with them and agree on how we are going to settle these invoices that we are not contesting, and agree that we owe them. And of course, they must continuously update the commitment registers. As I've indicated, colleagues, our colleagues from Auditor General have spoken to this, and then the biggest concern for us, I mean, is to simply say that, I mean, look, these findings, I mean, if nothing happens and they repeat the same things over and over, I mean, when we read the reports from our colleagues from the Auditor General, and to a large extent, I mean, non-compliance with SCM, where tenders are simply awarded to friends, to families, and then no consequences, as colleagues have actually said. And this is, of course, I mean, the leadership that must take responsibility in trying to resolve some of these key issues. And then in conclusion, we are simply saying that we do request that the committee notes the fiscal framework for the 2025 MTF, looking at those equitable share or conditional grants on revenue, and of course the revenue enhancement strategies that provinces are putting to the fore in terms of them trying to improve on revenue, given that the economy has not been growing for a while now. And of course, some of the economic growth and job creation strategies that we have presented here. So that some of this will actually require interventions, follow up, just to make sure that it's not just commitments, but people are able to then deliver on those. And then the spending on compensation of employees, as we said, it takes up about 61% of the total budget, which the focus must be there in terms of how provinces manage the headcounts as well. And then with the pressures in the three provinces there, of course, the realistic pressures that we see there probably in KZN. And then the spending performance in infrastructure, and then challenges leading to poor delivery, late approval of business plans, delays in SCM processes, and then that needs to be improved. And the conditional grants that they've been surrendering now for a number of years, as they are not able to then put together projects that are shovel ready and be able to commit this money, so that the monies can actually be rolled over as part of our rollover process. And of course, the accruals, 37 billion rand balance, mostly in health, 21.1 billion, and the implications when we do business with the service providers, and of course, the age issues that the colleagues have raised as well in here. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Just maybe to indicate what we generally do in terms of obviously raising these issues to provincial departments or to provincial treasuries. So in terms of the budget assessment, as you have seen, the slide about the fiscal framework of each province. So once they have submitted the draft budgets in November, we analyze and assess and make recommendations to each provincial treasurer. So we meet them separately and say these are the issues we see in education and health, and we think you have not covered 1, 2, 3. So that's what we do with them. And then after the end of the first quarter of each financial year, we do visit provinces. We meet with the big departments, or depending on the departments we choose where there are most problems, where we raise this number of issues that we are talking about today, as well as we, as intergovernmental relations, we go to infrastructure visits and see, and obviously make recommendations in terms of what needs to be done. As well as there are intergovernmental forums, whether the 10 by 10s, the budget bilateral meetings, where we continue to raise some of these challenges that we see, and from time to time as well, we write reports to the minister and say, hey, we're concerned about this province, like for instance the issues of obviously now is the biggest pressures have been in KZN, but obviously been previously there were issues in Northwest, and members know that at some point Northwest was under intervention, but things have improved, and I think AG has also indicated that as well. But we also continue to say the issues in these particular sectors and so on in different provinces. Thank you, Chair.
Sure. Thanks very much, National Treasury and Auditor General. I'm not sure. Let's continue, because I wanted to say let's take 2 minutes break because of the reports that we just received. Yeah, let's take 2 minutes break. Maybe just to yeah, just only 2 minutes. Then we'll come back. Yeah. No, Honorable Sart. Let's take 2 minutes break, please. And I know when you come back, you are going to fire and yeah, that will be good for us, because we can't take it. It's too much.
So let's say, still have time. Check.
Tell Gavin to bring me the Thank you. We must now continue with our meeting. I must indicate that the presentation from Auditor General and the National Treasury, if I will have powers, I will say some of the provinces be processed and be put under Section 100. If I will have powers, based on your presentation in any way, because I believe your presentation is something that those provinces are aware of. It's not something that you just bring to us as a committee without them knowing or without them seeing those things. And sometimes, as I'm seated here, I was telling Nkuleko to say, you know, what are also our mandate in terms of the report that we got. But I think it's something that ourselves as a committee we have to talk about. The issue of oversight, that we must also do the physical oversight. That is very much important. And we don't have powers to say, don't appropriate or don't, give any province money in any way. Before I want to raise three questions before I give to my colleagues, members of parliament. And one of the things I also want to indicate that the area that National Treasury spoke about, especially the one of the invoices. Personally, I will agree with that in some sense. Because, there on the ground, they politicize this payment. Sometimes they say we don't pay because it's Mr. Swart. I've just arrived. I want to make sure that Mr. Swart suffer because I know who this person has been doing the job. Two, or they will want to pay without even going to the area where they were supposed to do the job. You understand? So hence we are saying it is very much important for us as the committee, something that we don't want to talk about it. I'm going to give honorable members an opportunity to ask questions to both the National Treasury and the Auditor General, honorable members. And amongst other things, I will also request you to come with other recommendations if there's any, so that we can see how best can we build this institution. I'm going to start from Honorable Bretz, then Honorable Siwisa, Honorable Majola, Honorable Swart, Honorable, sorry? No, I'm saying Majola, then Swart, then Siwisa, then Ngumalo, the last. It will come like this. Isn't it, Cherry? Oh, no, my apologies. It's Honorable Brez. Yes, Honorable Didi, Honorable Majola, then Swart, then Siwisa, then... Yeah.
was on, then it went off. Okay, let's try again. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not going to repeat due to time constraint. There are a lot of questions. I'm from the Eastern Cape, representing the Eastern Cape, and I wanted to ask detailed questions about that. But after your presentation, or both presentations, I realized that there are occurring and reoccurring issues throughout all the provinces. And your recommendations throughout the years tended to have a rhythm in it, addressing the same issues over and over again. And once again today, when we look holistically at your reports, it is the same in this presentation. Now, the question arises, the road forward. We appreciate your recommendations, but it appears to me that there is on the one hand, inability, and on the other hand, a tend not to cooperate to implement your recommendations. But going forward, it appears to me throughout all our provinces, a series of growth reforms and accelerated implementation, not only of your recommendations, but accelerated implementation of growth reforms can drive faster than projected growth in all our provinces, and that is much needed. Secondly, when we consider your reports and the reasons for wasteful, unproductive, and unauthorized expenditures can be addressed maybe by a spending review across the board, so that we can get a picture of where the expenses lies, the reason therefore, and what can be done to make those expenses efficient in relation to service delivery. And then lastly, there should be, when we consider the green economy, global warming, the IT environment, that recommendations also should include accelerated energy reform in all provinces. Speedy digital transformation. We saw in the report problems with digital transformation. Increased private sector investment in infrastructure to clear backlogs and stalled projects. Of course, a regulatory reform in the information and ITC sector will be required. And maybe a review of the Public Procurement Act is also a possibility in order to address concerns in provinces and real concerns in provinces. So with that, I'm going to conclude. Thank you, Honourable Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson. Good morning to both the teams from the National Treasury and the Auditor General and members of the committee. Chairperson, let me also appreciate the presentations as been presented to the committee, but seated where I am seated, more of my questions I wish they were directed to the departments, because where I am sitting, they are the ones that needs to explain to the committee what are they doing with the recommendations. Because as the presentations were made before us, I'm seated here and as a public rep, of course, the recommendations, the improvement on the audit outcomes do not translate to what we see on the ground. And for me, it does not make sense. I am saying this mainly because I am from the Northwest and I can relate to the reports as been put before us. But before getting into the presentations, Chair, there's a video that was rotating where a speaker of one municipality had doubts and made serious allegations on the reports from the provincial Auditor General's office, to say that at some point they presented a report into council from the Auditor General, and the Auditor General said, this is not our report. This is not even the font that we use to present the reports. To an extent that it says to me that whatever recommendations made on that report might be overlooked on the basis that the Auditor General did not want to accept the report. I just want to create a platform for Mr. CBC maybe to give us clarity. Because when we talk of service delivery, for us, our communities relate better with municipalities. But Chair, as I've already mentioned, that most of my questions are basically on the day-to-day running of the municipalities. I also want to check with the Auditor General. Even when you make these recommendations, do you put timelines as to when these recommendations should be implemented? And what is it then that you do if these recommendations are not implemented? And also I want to check with the Auditor General or the provincial treasury to say what role are they playing in supporting these departments or these entities to improve their audit outcomes and to address the financial health concerns. Chairperson, I would not want to dwell much on these issues because seated where I am seated, most of the questions are saying, let's go to the ground. And I so wish, Chairperson, that I know everybody's representing their province, but I so wish the oversight can be taken to the Northwest Province. Because honestly, instead of seeing, yes, we may see improvements on the audit outcomes, but the situation in the Northwest is deteriorating on a daily basis. There is nothing, there is no improvement. Mr. Sibisi spoke on the health issues. We see hospitals being closed. We see the Department of Labor not happy with what is happening in our hospitals. We see the roads being dilapidated, and the situation is continuing on a daily basis. Really, for me to be sitting here and interrogating the presentations will honestly not do justice if I as a delegate would want to see the improvement on what has been presented before me. Thank you very much, Chair. Honorable Majola.
Oh, concurring with the previous speakers, Madam Chair, including yourself, with regards to the Auditor General's report, to me, if I were to suggest, we were not even going to consider the other provinces because the picture is the same. There is the matter of figures that are different. When we deal with the KZN1, definitely it will be a matter of figures, but we will see in alarming figures in terms of the irregular, the unauthorized, the fruitless. So it became to us as if we are listening to a song when you listen to the Auditor General's report, because almost the content is the same. And then with regards to, as the previous member said, with regards to the achievement that we are uploading here, next financial year you will find education back to the same situation, meaning there is no concrete plan as to we can be assured that once the education came up from the unqualified with no findings, then it might even stay for 3 or 4 financial years. Going to the questions, Madam Chair, one, it's direct to National Treasury with regards to the unpaid invoices. The presenter further indicated that there is a directive to the provinces that the priority should be given in terms of servicing this 37 billion. My question is, how impact is it going to have in terms of this current year commitments? Because I believe the unpaid invoices, it was for the previous projects or any other commitments, but I want to check, looking at 37 billion, that's a huge amount in terms of for your kickstart for a new financial year. Then you commit yourself on something that has been committed on the previous years. The next question, Madam Chair, which is a pattern again, provincial fiscal framework. I'm looking at the categories of the revenue. It's equitable shares, conditional grant, and then its own revenue. Maybe if we can be given an average as to, say, beside the grant fundings, what percentage are they, individual provinces, are they contributing towards their revenue section of their fiscals? We were sitting with COCTA, Madam Chair, last week. Now we were at the provincial level giving the grants to the municipalities. That was the same case. The municipalities contribute less than 50% of their revenue towards their collections, and it sounds there is a problem, as the previous speaker said. There is a problem within the concentrated areas. The provinces cannot raise, the municipalities cannot raise. That is shifting the burden to the National Treasury. That's another question. The last one, Madam Chair, it's with regards to the powers, the additional powers that the Auditor General has been given. Well, we might say it's an unauthorized expenditure or irregular expenditure, but we need to understand the nature, because if they exercise their extended power in terms of digging further, in terms of how did it become an irregular, because you might find that almost all is unauthorized, irregular, and fruitless. Somebody is using this terminology, but in fact this is a fraud. So I want to check with the Auditor General with its powers, additional one, because I know that they are not just auditing and then ends there. They've got even powers to understand the nature of the irregular expenditure and fruitless expenditure. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to the presenters for the information that we received. Just wanted to, and also want to add on what I've heard from the previous speakers. The first one on the Northwest, that was on slide 4 and 5, the audit outcomes. And it's delightful that to see that clean audits have increased in some departments. The regression in entities like the Golden Leopards Resort is, that's for me outstanding also, some of the entities. The question is, you know, what interventions will Treasury implement to support the provincial entities that have regressed, and what consequences have been applied for repeated audit disclaimers and non-submission, like the NTIs. For me, and I've also raised it in a meeting, you know, for me is that we have challenges in municipalities and some departments, capacity, oversight is very important. That's and then consequence management. On slide 9, the performance in information and education. The medium-term strategic framework indicates like the foundational literacy and reading plans were omitted. The question is, why are core indicators like the National Reading Plan, the School Readiness Plan, Readiness Assessment, in education excluded from planning documents, and what oversight is being applied to ensure that these are integrated in the future APPs. And then my next one is on the National Treasury, on the provincial finances. Out of the slides and presentation, provinces are still experiencing consistent underspending, particularly on capital and infrastructure, and that is not good. We hammer on capital and infrastructure projects as a way of job creation and development. What specific measures will Treasury enforce to prevent under execution of budgets, especially for infrastructure in high need provinces like the Eastern Cape and Limpopo? And slide 5 and 6, the own revenue collection. But we read provinces have room for enhanced own revenue, particularly through licensing reforms and property rentals. The question, what mechanisms exist to hold provincial departments accountable for not collecting owed revenue, like hospital fees, and state rentals, and will Treasury impose penalties or performance-based incentives? Chairperson, I think, the last one on the Eastern Cape report, I think that was on slide 6 to 8, performance. Education and health targets are not achieved, and I specifically named that too, despite full budget expenditure. Infrastructure projects are delayed by up to 9 years with no consequences. And that is the line that we saw for 9 years. It was an how many months project, and that was now delayed for 9 years. What changes will AG and Treasury recommend to address repeated delays and poor quality in infrastructure delivery, especially in education and health? Chairperson, I will stop there.
No, thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to agree with Honorable Lekwaso. We do have questions, but the people that are supposed to be hearing the questions are not here. That's the problem we are sitting with, Chair. So mine are more of comments than questions. Maybe there's one question that maybe I should start with to National Treasury. The issue of
have a concern, Chair. Provinces are underspending and then they decide to return the money. What would be the reason for provinces to act like this? Because if you go to Northern Cape, they always get grants for human settlement, but we are still struggling with providing people with houses. The last financial year, the Premier returned close to 92,000. I stand to be corrected, which you could have utilized somewhere. So this is why I'm saying some of the issues that we are going to raise here. They want premiers and MECs and the entities in the provinces to come here. Chair, when you go to Northwest, it's very heartbreaking of the issue of Northwest. When Northwest was handed over from Bukutatswana in 1994, it was one of the best provinces. Today, people go and tour Northwest to remind themselves of how beautiful Mafikeng was. The airport is closed down. Mabana is closed down. The studio that is there is closed down. The roads are a mess. Right now, as we are speaking, because I've been on Facebook, there are floods in Northwest as we are speaking now. People are literally saying, people, can you give us boats because we can't move around? And this is not the first flood, Chair. So we are going to sit here and talk, but we are talking to the wrong people. These people only went out to do the audit, gave us the report, made the recommendations. And now we need to make a follow-up with the premiers and the MECs. Have you implemented the recommendations? Why did you not implement the recommendations? So that the committee should be able to take a decisive decision and make our own recommendations to say, these people have been given a chance, AG, but they're not doing what is supposed to be done. We can put in the effort. The provincial treasury can put in the effort. National Treasury can put in the effort. But if people do not do, then this committee will have to sit down and make a recommendation to the president to say, you know what, it seems as if these people want us to go there and monitor them, put them under administration. We can say there is an improvement in the West. We can say there is an improvement somewhere, but it's not enough. Let's go to Eastern Cape. How do you spend so much money? 339 in claims paid out, which means there's negligence. There's no one who can go and consult a lawyer to sue a hospital unless there was serious negligence. So which means that there's negligence with either the doctors and the nurses and the staff. Number two, if we are being told that some documents are missing, then it means that the hospital cannot even prove to say, but it's not our negligence. So if there are no documents, you can't prove that you are innocent. So we have a serious problem in the Eastern Cape. I was telling a friend of mine yesterday at the airport, I said, South Africa is stressing God, but Eastern Cape is at another level. Like, Eastern Cape is taking 90% of stressing God. Because let's just see what's happening right now in the Eastern Cape. One case of a child that was raped on school premises has brought out 2 more cases in the same area. That's when I said, South Africa is stressing God, but Eastern Cape is taking the top of all of the provinces. And something needs to be done. How do you deal with the office of the Premier that does not submit papers? The question raises to say, how is the Premier going to monitor the MECs if he himself cannot do what needs to be done? So, Chair, we are going to make comments, but the people that are supposed to hear this are not here. And we need to take a decision as a committee to say, not on Zoom, they must come physical, sit here in front of us and tell us what is the way forward, what needs to be done. And I would like to applaud the Office of the AG National Treasury for the splendid job that you are doing. You are just doing your job. You are giving us the report. It's up to us what we are going to do with the report. So I don't have much to say, Chair. I'll wait for the premiers and the MECs to come here and tell us what are they doing with all of these recommendations. Because right now, we are going to sit here and then they are not going to implement, and then this same team again at the end of the financial year, they are going to audit, and then all of them have moved with 0.00005 improvement, which is nothing because there's no guarantee that there's no money that is not going to be returned at the end of this current financial year. So they need to come here so that we must make sure that there's no money that's going to be returned. Eastern Cape must get their house in order. We can't have a premier that is also featured in a report. Then it means that the Eastern Cape is actually collapsing. Thank you, Chair.
Before you come in, I think we must be clear about the oversight that we want to undertake. If we are saying we must go to the province, we don't want them here because they will do the same. The AG went to the province, they did the audit, but the honorable members are saying this audit that we are talking about is not what is on the ground. Isn't it? So we must go there and also identify whatever that we have or we see ourselves. Then we call them when we are in that province to say, in terms of the audit, this is what transpired, and the Auditor General says this, but in reality, there is a stadium that was supposed to be erected by 2 million. According to the report, there is a stadium, but we don't see a stadium. So, Honorable Numano.
No, thank you very much, Chair, and my greetings to you and AG, National Treasury, and also my honorable members here. Chairperson, let me first start by acknowledging the two presentations, well presented, well understood. Nothing, there's no figure of speech which you can't understand there. Everything is fine. But I want us to look at the issue that have been raised, especially on the Eastern Cape, Northwest, and also the National Treasury. Chairperson, it's true that there are a lot of discrepancies that has been found out, like the supply chain management, the regular expenditure, clean audit vis-a-vis the service delivery, the delay in the completion of a project for 9 years. The medical legal claim that are pending, and also the disclaimer. Whenever there's a disclaimer in your department, it shows that the AG does not see anything. It's just smoke. So it's something that it's very disturbing. Chairperson, the other issue, I think my colleague has said, the underspending is a criminal offense. They give you money and you fail to spend. So why are you going to work? Because you are failing to do the actual work that they've said you must do. And also the accruals, the unpaid invoice of the last financial year and the year starting, and we have to pay them. So it means we are living on deficit every day. So these are the challenges that we are faced with. I think, as my colleague have said, I think we must come up with a way to visit those provinces to say, Premier, these are your issue. So what is the program? Do you have a program? Do you have a plan to make sure that you resolve this thing? And you must also attach timeline so that when we come back, we'll have to check based on the program of action that you have come up with. So I think that one will assist, because we'll be talking day in and day out. The person who's supposed to be here or who's supposed to meet with him is not here. So I fully support what my colleague is saying. Let's go start with Northwest Chairperson. We start with Northwest, and they have posters to say that they don't have even an airport in the Northwest. It's something that is disturbing. So I fully agree, Chairperson, that we must come up with a program to go and meet the Premier and his colleague to say, what is your plan? What are you doing? Tell us in terms of the timeline, are you going to finish this? It can't be a project taking 9 years. It can't be. It's no, it's disturbing. It's a disgrace to the people. They will be waiting for the project for such long. Some of them will die looking at the project which is unfinished. Chairperson, I second the issue of going to the province, meet with the Premier. The Premier is the CEO. He must know everything. He must have a plan on anything that is happening in his or her province. So it can't be just a Premier for, it must be with answers, with the program, with all those things that will assist the province moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
If you can't stand the heat, stay away from the kitchen. Can we get responses from?
Thank you so much, Honourable Chairperson and Honourable Members. Thank you for the comments as well as the questions. I will try to cover the transversal ones that came through because I saw the recommendations and the additional powers were the ones that cut across, and then I'll ask my colleagues to assist me with the provincial specific ones. So Tobile and Motoko can answer the specific ones on Eastern Cape and the Northwest. So if you look at these recommendations, you're quite right, because I'm sure you have been introduced from our offices the accountability ecosystem, where we have put together all the role players that contribute to positive outcomes, to effective service delivery, to effective control environment. And what we do with those recommendations, the first trick is you go and speak to the people who can do something about it. So when we're having the conversations with the accounting officer, which is in the form of the HOD or the CEO of the entities, your role is very specific in terms of what you should be doing. So we have taken time to understand these roles. So when we actually put the recommendations out to you, they're not something that you should not be familiar with, because it's very, very aligned to your roles and your responsibilities and what you should be doing in the first place. Including that of, so if you just look at the accounting officers and the senior administrator, you've got to think that you would be occupying your time with the mandate, what you're there for in the first place. Understanding your department, what have you been basically put in that position to do? Then you would also like to think that the senior management is supporting the accounting officer in terms of, if you planned and if you budgeted, in terms of how you deliver, how it is being monitored, how is the control environment being strengthened. It's important. Those are well, let's just put it this way, those are the things that you should be occupying your time with. Otherwise, what else could you possibly be doing? And then if you look at them, they also extend. They've got the internal audit and the audit committee to also assist. Look, we pay for internal audit, whether it's internal, whether we outsource it. The audit committee is generally, you get the capabilities that come from the outside. And what are they doing? Are they fulfilling their terms of reference? Are they actually supporting the strengthening of the control environment as well? So you have these opportunities to work with. So even when it goes to the executive or the oversight, as I said, we have spent a lot of time in terms of understanding. So when we give these recommendations, it is aligned to what you should be doing in the first place. So I think that would be a win, because we're not asking you to do something other than what you have been, in terms of your roles and responsibilities. It's quite right. It should be time framed. It is, you should be showing movement. And it's quite right that in terms of the recommendations as well as the commitments, I have you know that we also obtain signed commitments. Because when we give these recommendations, we say, you know what, commit to us. What are you going to do to change this picture? So when we do go, our processes doesn't end at the end of the audit, issue the outcome. We continuously do visits to the role players that are meant to do something about it to say, how are these recommendations progressing? How are these commitments progressing? So it's a continuation that will now lead us to the audit period now, which we just finished in end of March, and then our teams are busy out there doing the audits to say, all of this, all of these things that you knew, what have you done to change the picture? So I think that's important to say that, the recommendations are there. There is very little or no movement, as well as we obtain these commitments, and really to see that what needs to be done by whom to change this picture going forward. So that is the transversal one I picked up in terms of recommendations, and if they are not done, well, our root causes says a lot, right? If you allow, let's just say, poor controls, non-compliance to continue, and the continuous transgressions without taking any consequence, people will continue to do just exactly that. So the importance is when you get this information, how you act and how you improve the control environment, how you improve the culture within these departments and entities. The other one was transversal, was the powers. So the powers in terms of the material irregularities that we issued, you will see, as you spotted in our slides, there'll be a standard slide to say how many material irregularities we have issued with regards to the province. Was it related to material losses? Was it related to fraud or harm to the institutions or even the people, to the citizens? Are the material irregularities in terms of our powers that we have issued? So in each province, you will see exactly what we've issued, what it relates to, whether there is action being taken on these material irregularities, whether the losses are indeed being recovered. But I think what's critical is, are the control environments improving to not have this? And in saying that, when we issue the material irregularity, it means that everybody in this accountability ecosystem that I've mentioned have actually failed in doing their work. But now we are now asking the very same people that, you've missed this, but now we have these powers that can convert it to perhaps a recommendation or a referral, or finally a certificate of debt to say, look, now we've earmarked this one, we picked this one, there's it here, this is what it looks like. And chances are it came up because you probably didn't do something in the first place to detect this material irregularity. So those are the two transversals ones that I picked up. I'll now hand over to my colleagues to do the provincial specific responses. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. I'll just touch on a few of the ones maybe that impacted Eastern Cape. Maybe we can start with the indicators that were excluded at education. So maybe you just wanted the reasons as to why that is. It's difficult to explain, except that someone along the line did not do what they're supposed to do. I mean, if you think about it, we come in as external auditors. We are auditing their frameworks that guide them, and we pick up that they did not do something. So there's a whole program or department that deals with that specific objective, and it missed the whole process, from the person drafting the performance report to the reviewer, finally maybe to even the political oversight that are responsible for the political delivery. So it's clearly many people in the value chain did not do what they were supposed to do. And you find maybe that there is a tendency of that, whereby the audit process picks up things. The audit process picks up material misstatements. The audit process picks up indicators that are not included. The audit process picks up information that is not all reported. So there is a failure in that system. So I think that's why you'll see our slides. We always talk about the accountability ecosystem. There's a whole system involved, starting from the officials to the senior management, eventually to the political leadership. So at all levels, we interact and we influence those role players to ensure that they do what they're supposed to do. The accounting officer is probably the most central figure in this environment, and the only person that can prod the accounting officer to act beyond that is the political leadership, the MEC. So if those are not executing as they're supposed to, then you are likely to to see these situations. So it is an unfortunate issue, but it is a trend that you pick up, that it's generally the auditors that come and pick up issues. We also noted the project that has been ongoing for 9 years. So it is really a classic case of poor project management. So this was the housing project at Inguza Hill. It was meant to construct 500 houses. So project management, the initial contractor got in and he probably saw that he couldn't deliver, so it brings into question how the supply chain process worked. He abandoned site. Then it took a while for someone else to come in. He built a few more houses, then he abandoned site. So you can see now, you know, is the supply chain process is working to make sure that they are, appointing people that can do their job, and are they reacting early enough when they clearly see the delivery is not happening? Because, once the contractor abandons site, you've probably paid him a lot of his money, probably not going to be able to recover it. You need to find budget elsewhere, and by the time you go out for tender, the costs have escalated and the projects keep on escalating. So really, human settlements, as you saw in the overall presentation, the whole housing delivery has actually really been lagging behind, and maybe this one really highlights the extent of the issues that we are picking up. I think those are the two specific ones that related to Eastern Cape. I think you did touch on the negligence at health. Maybe that's something that really needs to be dealt with as an area of concern. Also, targets not being met. So with the infrastructure targets, so you'll find, like as indicated in the presentation, there's a lot of variation orders that happen. So it's possible that you plan to complete the project with X budget, you get to that budget expend, and for whatever reason, it's highlighting maybe the procurement process didn't work properly because now all of a sudden the guy needs more money, or there's other factors they didn't consider. So now the project is escalating in terms of cost, but it's not moving in terms of completion. So all of these issues are really talking to procurement and to the contract management around that. We really need to then start looking at the capacity within these departments to manage projects. Some of them do outsource to consultants. Are they holding those consultants properly accountable? So in general, that is an area that is a weakness in our province and that really needs close attention. I think throughout the administration, we have been reporting those issues. I'll hand over to my colleague, Mtoko. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Honorable Chair. And I also want to thank Honorable Sefasa for the platform and for the opportunity to reflect or comment on the issue that and the video clip. As a starting point, Chair, I must say that video and the comments that are there are rather unfortunate, coming from the Speaker of Mahikeng. Unfortunate because there is no evidence provided for such. But let me, at least up until at this stage, perhaps let me just briefly talk to the audit process. When we do the audit, there are so many.
Well, before you continue, do you know about the clip?
I do.
Okay.
I do. Thanks. There are so many processes that the audit goes through before we issue an audit opinion. Amongst other things, we've got, for example, ERPA as an institution doing the quality review, but even before we issue the audit report, there would be people outside of the organization doing a quality review of the audit report, which we call the pre-issuance. Before we issue the report, there will be people dealing with that. And this specific report would have gone through, I think, about 3 layers. Internally, we had our technical unit doing what is called a proactive review before we issue. We had a seasoned person from outside also doing the pre-issuance review on that. So there are so many processes that we go through and the reports that go through before we issue to make sure that what we issue, when we issue the report, it complies with the international standard and the auditing standards before we issue. That's one aspect on the quality of the reports that we issue. That's number one. Number two, internally there is a dispute resolution process which has been socialized as well, to say if there is any member within our stakeholders that we deal with that is unhappy with something, that this is how you lodge a complaint so that your matter can be taken forward. And if you listen to that clip and you see the colleague that I had sent to do the presentation in that speakers forum reiterate exactly that, to say there is a process that needs to be followed. If there is evidence, that's what needs to be followed. So that process is known and is socialized, Honorable Chair. And what I think is going to be important and critical is the provision of the evidence of what is being said in that video. To that extent, we've then been trying to secure a meeting with the Honorable Speaker, so that it is as a starting point, so that we understand where those comments are coming from and what informs such unfortunate statements about the organization, more so as well about the office in the Northwest. And I take it in the serious light from my side, because I lead that province, for example. So I take that such statements seriously. And internally, once the complaints are lodged, there is an internal process that we go through. If an investigation has to be done, that's a thorough, detailed process that happens internally, so that, because all of us, as an organization, we are expected to comply with the code of ethics, either the International Code of Ethics or within the profession itself. And within the organization, there is also similar code of conduct and ethics. Anyone who is found to have floated or done anything that is not aligned to that, I mean, the office deal with such matters seriously. So for me, that is important. So we are seeking a meeting, to get a meeting with the speaker. We have not been able to get hold or to secure the meeting, but that's what we are going to do. So in short, Speaker, I can tell you that was the misrepresentation that happened there. And the facts are basically as follows. At the beginning of this year, so what seemed to have happened is that there is a particular finding which is included in the audit report, which went to council. And that finding, between the administration and the speaker, there was a conversation and a discussion on the finding. So when there is the tabling process, we're there to table, and we have to table an audit report, and the question is asked about a particular finding. Our response, correctly so, is going to say we are dealing with the matters that are sitting here in the audit report, and that finding is also in the audit report. But what we are not able to comment and talk to is the conversation that would have happened on the particular finding between the speaker and the administration and head of administration, because none of the team members would have been part to such conversation, and you can't then comment on something like that. So, and to say then the team distanced themselves from the audit report, that's not true. The tabling happened on the 30th. And in fact, Chair, on the 29th of Jan, generally I meet with the leaders of the municipalities myself. So on the 29th of Jan, I would have met with, in a meeting, where the executive mayor was part of that, the speaker was part of that, the MM was part of that meeting. There were no, and the following day there was going to be tabling happening. There was really nothing that was raised as a concern that this is an issue leading to the tabling the next day. As I wrap up on this, so when you talk about the report itself, it's really interesting because you look at Mahikeng currently. We had a robust conversation with the mayor, because the executive mayor, because this year, prior to tabling, because he was not, and the leaders were not happy that how come it regressed from a number of findings, from 2 findings to 9 findings. You know, that was the unhappiness. If you talk about Mahikeng report, it's actually worse compared to last year or year before that. So that's another conversation. But on the other side, you seem to, there is rather an insinuation that the report was better than the previous year, and the report is not the true reflection of what had transpired. So I do not really, Chair, what I do not want to venture into, I do not want to venture into a space on what might be happening within the municipalities, because I do not know. But what I do know, we've received a letter, which we've also shared with the Auditor General as well, from the Executive Mayor saying we want to distance ourselves from the utterances of the Speaker. We want to distance Council from the utterances of the Speaker. So we've got that letter which we've shared internally. But that does not mean that we still need to have a meeting with the Speaker to understand the basis for this, because look, it's a serious matter that needs to be taken in that light. I'll pause there. As to what happens internally, I wouldn't want to venture into that space, Chair. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'll start with the responses. I'll start with the accruals or unpaid invoices. So maybe just to make this point that at the end of the financial year, as we know, consistently in terms of what we have presented, they've been underspending from provinces. So with those accruals where there are commitments that would then spend money, when we roll over the conditional grants, they'll be able to pay that. But now if you look at the chunk of the accruals or unpaid invoices from health, which is about 58%, this 21.7 billion is 58% of the 37 billion. So essentially then what it does, and maybe just to say that the honorable member, this is the invoices from the 2023-24 financial year, which means they had an impact on the financial year that just ended. And I'll just explain how then those are accumulated at the end of the financial year that ended last week will impact on this year. So, but I think probably I need to make an example of what happened in the 2024-25 financial year. So what happens, as Michael would have said, that they start paying the invoices of previous year with the new budget. And what it does is that by the time we get to October, November, you will see that, let's say, your medicine budget is spending around 80-something% because they are running out of cash now in terms of the funding for medicines, and spending is also at that level. So you see that because those are the items that they keep on, overcommitting on. And I suppose I'm not trying to make an excuse for them, but members will recall that health services is a demand driven, so communities come and you need to provide services. So therefore, I think in this light, members would recall that Minister announced some funding for the health sector, acknowledging that there are some challenges that require funding, particularly for goods and services, because this every December, some of them have run out of money for these services, important services. Then what they do, they still order medicines and all other that are required to deliver their services, but they don't pay. And particularly in the last quarter of the financial year, then we get calls or emails from service providers to say, hey, these people are not paying, and then we follow up with the provincial treasuries. Provincial treasuries go to the department and say what is going on, to find out what's happening. So probably the same trend will happen even in this current financial year, that there are invoices of the last quarter that are coming to this. But I must say that the provinces that are really doing well in terms of that. I mean, if I look at, for example, in the past year, I looked at Limpopo and Mpumalanga. When you look at their invoices, you find that most of them are within 30 days, and not like your Gauteng, where you find that most of the invoices are more than 30 days old. So there are some that are really trying their best to make sure that they clean up, but there are those that have got big challenges. So it's a serious issue that we're continuously working with the sector to see, as well with the provincial treasurers, to see how we best support the sector to ensure that they clean up, because it's a really big risk within the provinces. Just on the issue that Honorable Brett raised around, I think on the acceleration of growth reforms, I think we do all agree that they're important and needs to be done, even in terms of the green economy and all of that, and digital transformation, they're important for this country. But on the issue of the spending reviews, just to say that so what has happened previously is, I think Minister made the point that we've been doing spending reviews since 2013. So we've done a number of spending reviews for provinces at national government level, because, and the reason we do that is it's always best to do a program. If you say we're going to look at scholar transport, you do scholar transport across the board within all provinces and see who's doing what and what is the kind of a good practice, if any, for that matter. So we've done such at national level, but also what we have done, provinces have been trained, particularly the provincial treasurers, on to do spending reviews for themselves, and a number of them have done reviews even in education, given what their challenges are within that particular province. So it's something that. So what we continuously do, honorable members, in this regard. So obviously there are recommendations from those spending reviews, either that we have done as national government for on provincial programs, or the ones that they have done. So what we continuously do when we meet provincial treasurers in particular, we raise the issue of implementation of recommendations. So I think that's the biggest problem, to say if there are ways of being efficient, so please implement the recommendations from the spending reviews. So I think maybe on the issue of revenue, I'll allow Michael to talk about the percentage of own revenue contribution, but maybe just to say, from the question from Honorable Majola about obviously revenue, and also talking about municipalities, as to say, obviously in terms of municipalities, they've got more revenue powers than provinces. If you look at making an example of, with municipalities, that if you look at their budget this year is 650 billion, and the national transfers is only 176.8. So therefore, more than perhaps 60% is their own revenue, but they could do better. So there are leakages in the system as well, as we know. They could do better in that respect. So looking at, I think in relations to, I think, the indicators and the outcomes, perhaps when the committee meets with the premiers, they could raise this point about the oversight they play in terms of making sure that what the money buys, because it's important. And the reason I'm raising this is because within provincial governments, they are given this mandate to ensure that the APPs or annual performance report plans are implemented, and they oversee that function within the provincial government space. So it's important that this issue of money spent but less delivery, I think it would be important that members raise that. In terms of what are measures we do to reduce continuous underspending, so on the conditional grants, we do something we call stopping and reallocation, and I know that it's something that obviously institutions resist anyway. They don't like it because what we do, even both from on the provincial government side or even on the local government side, we look at what are departments, but together with obviously with the transferring officers to the national departments overseeing that function, what are those provincial departments that are underspending or not performing well, even in terms of the output that are, that are supposed to deliver. And based on that, we also look at what are those that are really accelerating delivery. So let me make example with a grant for housing units and service sites, which is Human Settlement Development Grant. So what I've done this previous financial year, we've stopped that grant in a number of provinces and giving it to those who are accelerating, like Mpumalanga, I think, and Limpopo, the beneficiaries of that. And provinces like Western Cape and Gauteng, we took money from them and give these ones. And I think even in the case of education, we took money from province like your Free State, and I don't remember the other one. And we gave to Free State actually and KZN, they benefited from the education one, where we took money from another province. So we do that to ensure that not a lot of money is sent back to national government. It's to ensure that if there are people who are really ahead of delivery in terms of infrastructure delivery in particular, then we assist them, we incentivize them by giving them more money within that particular area, taking from those who are not doing well. So, but obviously we know the fact that taking money from that particular province doesn't make the needs go away. It's still there, but obviously we are saying people need to plan better and implement projects better, as it has been said that there are issues with implementation. So that's what we're doing in that regard. So I think maybe on the issue of maybe just to indicate, I know that Honorable Switzer spoke about the 92,000 returned by Office of the Premier. So what we highlighted in the slides are money on the conditional grants, because in terms of when you underspend on the equitable share, the money stays with the province. So it's a provincial revenue. It becomes a provincial revenue, if you like, at the end of the year. But the money that is got conditions, like conditional grants, if it's not committed, we are not getting rollover, it must get back. So the 12 billion we spoke about for a number of years is mainly on the conditional grants. So with the equitable share, if they have spent that 92, for example, what they're able to do is to say if there's a pressure in the province in education next financial year, we're able to allocate it back to, you don't have to allocate it from the Premier, because obviously there's room for them to absorb that, but is the provincial money that stays within the province. So maybe a last point from my side, I wanted to talk just a little bit on the issue of medical legal, because obviously as we are responsible for provinces also we look into that and the issues around that. And obviously it's been a big issue, so the liability is big, but if you look at obviously what has been at least spent over a couple of years, the amount has reduced a bit, but depending on the province, because we have seen that essentially the province that tends to pay a lot of money, there are three in the countries: Eastern Cape, Gauteng, and KwaZulu-Natal. So that's where the big monies are spent. That's where even if you look at the liabilities, they've got bigger liability than any other in our province. But obviously they've been working as a sector to say what are the things that we need to put in place to ensure that we minimize, the payments, because obviously the liability you can't minimize in the sense that anybody can falsify, because as members would have known that there was even an SIU investigations, you know, because there were collusion, you know, all of that, and the lawyers not, you know, not even giving the kids money once they take them, you know, claim them from government. You know, there are a lot of corrupt activities that happen even in this space. So obviously the issue of record keeping is something that the sector is working hard to look at, to ensure that, especially electronic record keeping, because I mean there's been issues of people, you know, whether the officials stealing the files and all of that, but also the issue of obviously ensuring that they defend the cases. So we hope that, and also obviously the state liability amendment bill, once it gets to that level and it gets passed at some point, it will also reduce the issues of around the medical legal claims. So Michael can do other
Thanks,
things.
thanks, honorable members. Just to add, starting with the fiscal framework in terms of provincial owned revenue contribution to the total revenue that the provinces get. Obviously, a big chunk of it comes from equitable share and conditional grants, and then that contributes between 95 and 90 to 97% of what provinces are getting on the receipt side. And then the reason why that is the case is possibly because they exist to deliver mostly concurrent functions. They deliver largely on the national mandate, and then they've got limited revenue raising capabilities. As I indicated, I mean, the biggest revenue source for provinces is motor vehicle license fees. And if you look at Western Cape and Gauteng, they are the ones actually that are raising about 5% of own revenue. And then simply because if you look at the vehicle population in the country, most of the motorists are in these two provinces. So those are the ones that are able to raise at least about 5%. So the other provinces, I mean, on average, is about 3%. And then on the issue again of provinces not collecting on some of this own revenue and whether there are any mechanisms that entry can enforce. And I think in terms of Section 39 of the PFMA, I mean, it's very clear that because when provinces table that fiscal framework that I was putting together there, if any department is going to undercollect, that automatically affects the provincial fiscal framework. So in terms of Section 39, so if there is any impending undercollection, so that department must inform the relevant executive authority and then the provincial treasury that they are going to undercollect. And of course, it's up to the provincial treasury to make sure that they enforce that. And part of the enforcement could include, if a department is going to undercollect, then maybe you penalize them in terms of the allocation that they must get. But of course, if they over-collect, you must incentivize them. So you share both the pain and the gain in the process of doing that. Yeah. But otherwise, in terms of actually supporting provinces, a lot has been done. I mean, we worked with the CIDB, issued the toolkit, the framework for infrastructure procurement and delivery management. I mean, there was an ID program, the Infrastructure Delivery Improvement Program in the National Treasury that supported capacity building in provinces. Technical assistance were placed in departments to support them to build that capacity. So over time, of course, officials must take over and do the work that they are paid to do. Yeah, but of course, otherwise, all of these things, despite all the support that is there, I mean, the question was asked to say, can something maybe be done? Probably the forensic investigation, something that will help as part of this process. Because otherwise, I mean, if you threaten, at some point we threaten them and say we are going to do forensics, and you see people surrendering big sums of money, nothing happens, it's business as usual. So yeah, that's where we are. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Two questions. One to National Treasury, one to Auditor General. Ne? Straight to the point. Is it possible for the politicians in any institution, be it a municipality or the department, to buy the audit report? No. You understand what I'm saying? All of you understand? Yes. Is it possible? It's not. Is it possible for you, for certain municipality or certain province, to give you money, to take money from other province to give it to the other province?
Can you clarify again, Chair?
I wanted to say yes or no, like that.
Is it possible for us to take money?
Like we are saying, we didn't spend money, right? Then you can see that this province didn't spend money. Then you connive with this other province to say, okay, don't worry, we're going to take money from this one to give you.
No.
Then, no.
No.
Legislator, thank you. Why I'm saying this, honorable members, in as much as we are getting report from you, the audit report, National Treasury is also complaining, you understand, in terms of what is happening on the ground, including the members of parliament. We are now talking about the oversight. Anything can happen. And obviously, members on the ground, they are talking. They are talking on the ground. Some they will say, we don't see the stadium. They bought the audit. Why they say clean audit? Because there's nothing like that. Do you get what I'm saying? So at some instance, you find that when community are raising issues, the name of the auditors are there, the name of the National Treasury to say they took our money because they connived with these people from National Treasury. That's why they took the money, because we told them that we are still looking at the plan, how best can we utilize that money. So that's what I'm trying to say. In as much as there is a report that is coming from the provinces, from the municipalities, we must also bear that in mind. These people, they are very much critical. Thanks very much, Auditor General. Thanks very much, National Treasury. It was very much insightful, the briefing that we got from you, and we are very much happy, and we hope that the next meeting, because we'll be inviting the provinces, and you'll be able to say, yes, indeed, we came to your municipality, we did what we were supposed to do, and then this is the outcome of the audit. Thanks very much. And then we're going to release you while I will be remaining with the honorable members until we finalize the remaining process. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have a proposal to make. It's not the first time that these minutes were circulated. It was circulated in of last year, it was circulated this year. It was circulated to us all again now. So two proposals. A, in future that we have the minutes of the previous meeting at the next meeting, that takes all the complications out. My second proposal is while we have ample time, months of time to peruse all the minutes, I'm going to propose that the minutes as circulated are adopted.
Can we take one by one? Understand what you are saying, Honorable Prince? Can we take them one?
Proposed. Proposed.
I propose, Chair. I propose, Chair. I propose, Chair.
Proposed.